Hey, everybody. Welcome to Just a Guy in a Bible, the place where I get to look at scripture and try to make sense of everything that's going on. Specifically, I'm uploading at least one time a week right now as I try to recap what I talked about during Sunday's sermon. This week is, again, another special week. I'm actually going to have two videos this week where I'm going to talk about something I didn't get a chance to talk about on Sunday. So this is a really fun week going on. Listen, if you're new to the channel, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and write down below. I think it's right about over in this area. Click on that subscribe button, ring the bell so that you don't miss anything that is coming up. Again, I'm trying to push these out at least once a week. Then, of course, if you like today's video, if you are encouraged, if you are challenged, then I'm going to ask you to hit the like button, share it with anyone else that might be blessed by what we're going to talk about today. So, what are we going to talk about today? Well, today is a very special day. Today is a very difficult day, quite frankly, because today we're looking at a passage in Genesis chapter 19. Now, in Genesis chapter, we've been looking at Abraham, right? Genesis chapter 19 is the passage where Abraham has pled with God. He has begged God to not destroy the area of Sodom and Gomorrah because that's where his nephew Lot lives. And the Lord finally relented and said, I will not destroy it, an area of, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people. I will not destroy it if there's at least 10 righteous people. And today, the passage that we look at today is going to show us that there was not, in fact, 10 righteous people, unfortunately. So what we see with Sodom and Gomorrah is actually a bit of a warning for you and I, right? It's a bit of a warning about what could happen, about what did happen. And even Jesus talks about looking at it as a warning, like looking back to the warning of Sodom and Gomorrah. And so we know that it's a warning. So the question is, why is this a warning, right? Like what is the warning? What is going on? Well, it's a hard passage, and like I said, there's a lot of things going on in this passage, um, and the reality is, it's a passage that warns us about two specific behaviors. Okay, two specific character traits, two specific, you could call it an identity, whatever you want to, however you want to phrase it, but there's really two things that are going on, and we're going to get to those in a minute. But the first thing that we need to understand is we need to know what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah. Like realistically, practically speaking, what happened here? Well, in the very beginning of this passage in Genesis 19, we see that the angels went down to Sodom and Gomorrah. Specifically, they went down to Sodom and they were greeted very hospitably by Lot, right? Now, as they walked into the area, as they walked up to the city, you might ask yourself, what did it look like, right? Was this just a village, or what did it actually look like? And here's what it is. In Ezekiel chapter 16, verses 49 and 50, you can go there and look that up. And I want you to. Ezekiel 16, 49 through 50, here's what it says. Behold, this was the guilt of your sister Sodom. Okay, so we have here exactly what Sodom is guilty of, okay? She and her daughters had pride, excess of food, prosperous ease, but did not aid the poor and needy. They were haughty, and this is important, and did an abomination before me. So I removed them when I saw it. So we see a little bit about the town in general, right? This is kind of an overarching town, and what we're seeing is we're seeing very well-off people, right? Very wealthy, but very proud of themselves, right? Like they've done really good for themselves, and great, I'm happy for them. But the problem is that while they're doing so good for themselves, they really don't care about anyone that's not them, right? That there's this pride. They have excess of food. They have prosperous ease. They've made an easy life. but they didn't help others. They didn't assist those that needed assistance. And that action of not helping others, uh, of not giving assistance, folds into the sin of pride, of thinking that you are the best and you can't be bothered to help anyone else, right? That's what pride is all about. It's thinking of you as number one. That means here's what that means. That means you know better than everyone else. That means if you're in a church and your pastor or your elders tell you a specific thing and you say, no, that's wrong, um, because you know better than everyone else. That's pride, or at least it can be, unless they are actually unbiblical. Um, but pride is basically saying you know better than everyone else and you will be better than everyone else. Okay, so there's that. But then it says they were haughty, which really, here's the haughty is just the verb form of pride, right? It's arrogance. It's being proud and puffed up of for yourself. And so that's what haughty is. And so, but here's what it says: and they did an abomination. Okay, so that's a word that I want you to just tuck back down into your brain. Okay, they did an abomination. Honestly, when you look at what how Sodom is described here, we can look at any major industrialized first world country and look at the large cities there, and we're going to see what Sodom is, what's being described as Sodom. I mean, that's just the reality, right? When you have people that are walking around naked and doing perverse things in public, well, that's pride, right? But that's as as Lot is walking up, that's what he sees, right? That's what he's. I'm sorry, as the angels are walking up to Lot, that's kind of what they're experiencing. But Lot greeted them with hospitality. That's awesome, right? Then after they ate, Lot made a big meal. Now, I want to be clear here for a second. See, Lot invited them to his house, and they said, "No, it's okay. We'll just sleep in the town square." That was kind of a normal thing to do. But Lot said, "No." See, Lot knows the town that he lives in. He knows the city, and so Lot says, "No, no, you have to stay at my house." So finally they relented. They stayed with Lot in his house. And so Lot made them a big feast and he cooked them fresh bread. And it was a fantastic meal. I'm sure they loved it. And then after they ate, they went to bed. That was kind of the custom in that time: dinner and then bed. And so after they ate, they went to bed. But then here's what happened. And this is terrifying. This is a very large community. At a minimum of 25,000 people live in this community. Okay. And so and you can presume half of those are men, okay? But here's what happened. After they ate, as they're beginning to bed down, the men of Sodom surround the house. They don't nicely knock on the door. They surround the house. So you're looking at 12,000 plus men. They surround the house and they yelled, and essentially they started a riot, right? And here's I want to read this to you. I have to find it really quick though because I forgot to mark it. It says here that they called out to Lot, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may know them." Now, this is the ESV, okay? Another translation is going to essentially say that they want to sleep with them. They want to have sex with them, okay? Uh, and so that's what happened here. The men of the town, and this is all of the men of the town, okay? Um, everyone, everyone was there. Every man of the town was there. And so they're loud. They essentially started a riot, right? As they were pressing in. And basically, here's the deal. They were yelling out that they wanted to gang rape these two men. Yeah, that's messed up, right? But here's what's even more messed up. Some people have said, well, this is simply a show of force. They want to show that they're superior to these men, but that's ridiculous. Okay, let's just be very clear about that. That's ridiculous. But and here's what happened. Lot has two daughters that have never had sex with a man, two virgin daughters. Lot calls out to these men. He says, hey, don't do this evil thing to my visitors. They're under my protection. Instead, take my virgin daughters. But the men didn't want women. The men wanted men. The men demanded men, not women. So they'd had a desire to gang rape men, not women. And so at that point, the angels, they saved Lot. They struck every man in the town with blindness. And so they were, groping around and trying to find whatever. And eventually they went home, they went to sleep, whatever. And at that point in the morning, the angels actually forced Lot. They said, hey, let's go. And Lot's like, hey, not yet. They grabbed Lot's hand. They grabbed Lot's wife's hand. They grabbed the hands of the two daughters, and they forced them to leave. They forced them to leave the town because they weren't ready. They didn't want to. Whatever reason, they decided they didn't want to go. And so at that time, the Lord destroyed the city, wiped out completely. Genesis chapter 19, verse 24 and 25, it says this: the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven, and he overthrew those cities. In other words, he destroyed, he leveled those cities and all of the valley. It's not just Sodom, it's not just Gomorrah. There was like 5 cities in the valley right there that was beautiful. Remember, the whole reason Lot went to the valley is because he said that area was beautiful. It had better ground for the flocks, and so that's why he wanted to go there. It was beautiful. But the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire out of heaven, and he overthrew those cities and all the valley. And listen to this, and all the inhabitants, every single man, woman, child, and all the inhabitants of those cities. And this is what's fascinating, and what grew on the ground. He made the ground untenable. Right? Like you can't grow food, which means you can't feed your flocks. What once was beautiful now isn't. That's what happened here. And Lot and his family, they were told a very specific thing to do. They were told not to turn around. Don't look back. And Lot's wife, this is the story everybody knows, Lot's wife was turned into a pillar of salt because she turned back. She took her eyes off of the Lord and looked to what she had. And she put that as a priority. And so the Lord turned her into a pillar of salt. Now, I want to show you something, because we read in that passage that the Lord rained down sulfur and fire. Now, there's been a big debate amongst Christians for decades, probably centuries, about where is Sodom and Gomorrah, like specifically. And here's the thing. There are multiple scholars, there are multiple archaeologists that actually believe that they have found Sodom and Gomorrah, right? And so I want to show you something that's really interesting that I found, because here's why they think they found Sodom and Gomorrah, because they found sulfur. So look at this. I'm gonna look at this. It's gonna be right here, okay. And I'm going to bring this in closer for you here in just a second, but the burning sulfur ball has melted its way down through the rock due to the heat the canal sealed. So imagine this for a second, this burning ball of sulfur, and there is ground, and the burning ball of sulfur goes through the ground because it's so hot, and then the ground reseals, cutting off the oxygen and effectively killing the flame of the sulfur ball, which means that there's going to be some sulfur left. Well, here, this is what they found. This photo is from Dr. Leonard Muller's book, the Exodus case. But with no oxygen, there's no further combustion, there's no further fire. The mineral close to the sulfur ball is relatively resistant to the erosion and thereby forms kind of a shell around it. So look at this. Just going to kind of close up on it, right? There we go, right here. Right here. And you can see right about here, that white ball, that white kind of oval disc, that is a sulfur ball. That is a pure sulfur ball. And you can look at this. You can look this up online. You can see it for yourself. You can see people actually are selling some of these balls, but you can see people that are burning these balls. And here's the amazing things. This is 100% pure sulfur. The most pure sulfur that is found anywhere else in the world is right here at the place where we read in Scripture that the Lord rained down sulfur. That's amazing to me. Like I'm fascinated at this idea, okay? But that's what happened. At the end of all of that, at the end of this whole story, you have Abraham. He goes up on the mountain and he looks down at the destruction that is happening below him, and the burning and the sulfur and the flames and the smoke and the screaming. And in Genesis 19:29, here's what it says. God remembered Abraham and sent out Lot from the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot had lived. God remembered Abraham. God made a promise to Abraham. Now we don't read this, but we can put 2 + 2 = 4, right? We understand that. God remembered Abraham. God saved Lot. This was a promise between God and Abraham that God would spare Lot. And so that is what we see happening here. And here's what's amazing about that. I don't know if you know this. A lot of people don't know this, but when you're reading the scriptures and it says God remembered, it doesn't mean God forgot. No, that word remembered would be better translated potentially as God is actively fulfilling his promise to Abraham. God is actively, the actions are happening right now that God is doing to fulfill his promise to Abraham. That's amazing. That is what happened. Okay, and that is just amazing. But here's the question that I have, and this is the question that is debated amongst a lot of people all over the place. What was Sodom's sin? Like, practically speaking, what was the thing that kind of drove it over the top to make it be destroyed? Well, I think we can see, first of all, from the passage we read earlier, we see that a big part of the sin is pride, right? Pride caused them to do many things that were evil, but it was rooted in pride. And so that's sin number one. It was rooted in pride. But that's not the end of it, because remember, at the end of that passage, it said they did an abomination. What did they do? Well, when God sent his angels, sent his messengers, sent his men into the city, what did they desire to do? They desired to gang rape these men, gang rape them. Now, many people will falsely say that the whole idea of Sodom and Gomorrah, their sin was inhospitality. And in one way, you can't possibly be more inhospitable than to gang rape somebody. But the reality is that the sin is the gang rape. It's the sexual immorality. It's the sexual degeneracy that is happening in Sodom and Gomorrah. Ezekiel said that they did an abomination, and we also read that same thing in Leviticus chapter 18, verse 22. It says, "You shall not lie with a male as with a woman. It is an abomination." The Lord speaks very clearly. And I know there are a lot of pastors and there are a lot of churches that are saying, hey, it's not that big of a deal. Just love the Lord. Just Jesus is love. God is love. Jesus saves the world, all this and that. And those things are true, but they're glossing over the reality that the Lord calls homosexuality an abomination, a sexual perversion. And anything that comes out of that would be the same thing. Now, here's what we know. Sodom and Gomorrah built a great city. Those people, they built a great civilization. But somehow, somewhere along the line, homosexuality got in there. The homosexual agenda got in, infiltrated these cities, okay? And then it grew in these cities, and then it grew in these cities, and it continued to grow in these cities. Now, many people will say what happened in Bible times isn't like what happens today. They'll say something to the effect of, they didn't experience the loving same-sex relationships, monogamous relationships. Well, that's not true, right? Because in Ecclesiastes 1:9, it says that the same evil we see today is the evil that they had then. There's nothing new under the sun. What exists today existed then. The sexual perversion we see today existed then. The loving same-sex monogamous relationships that we see today, they saw then, and God called that an abomination. Now, what do you do about that? Well, specifically, you have to push back against the reality of what's going on. Listen, we live in a culture that is forcing a very specific agenda, and they do it by evil ways, by saying something like, if you believe in a marriage between one man and one woman, well, then they're going to call you a bigot, they're going to call you a racist, they're going to call you every name under the sun. And so Christians don't want to be called those things, and so they just stay quiet. And more comes into the culture. More and more happens. More and more is going on. And so we cannot, as believers, as Christians, we cannot do that. Listen, we live in a community, in a region in northern Illinois, and our governor in Illinois is trying to push a very specific sexual education agenda where they would begin in kindergarten or younger talking about sexualities. That's disgusting. It's completely disgusting. Right now, all of the local schools in our county are pushing back and saying we're not going to do that. However, there will come a day when there is not an option but to follow through with it. So what do you do? What do you do about that? Well, listen, parents, homeschool, private school. Like those really are your options. Unfortunately, if you live in a district, if you live in a place where these ideologies are being shoved down your throat, you have to fight for your children. Don't martyr your children because of you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. Fight for your children. If you don't, listen, what happened there will happen here. Sodom and Gomorrah is a warning to us that if we reject the Lord and the Lord's command, then there will come a day of judgment. And that's scary to talk about, and people don't want to talk about, but that's true, guys, and I don't want to see that happen to you. So how do you avoid that? How does this warning apply to you? Well, first of all, don't approve of sin. Like, don't let it just go on around you without even paying attention. Don't approve. Secondly, focus on the Lord. Keep your eyes on the Lord and don't look back like Lot's wife did. That's what you got to do. Don't approve of sin and keep your eyes on the Lord. Listen, 1 Thessalonians 5:22 says to abstain from every form of evil. Don't let just a little bit in. It's not a big deal. It's just a little bit of evil. No, abstain from every form of evil so that it doesn't grow within you or grow within your culture. Don't approve of sin and focus on the Lord and don't focus on the world. Listen, I'm going to put down below in the description, I'm going to put a video that I did where I kind of describe what it means to focus on the Lord, but I'm going to give you the really short, condensed version. Surrender your life to Christ. Number one, surrender your life to Christ. Number two, spend time with the Lord daily. That's reading the Bible and that's praying, okay? Spend time with the Lord daily. Number three, memorize the word of the Lord. Memorize Bible verses. Like put these words into your mind. Number four, attend church regularly. Don't attend once a month. Attend every week. Attend your Bible study, small group, Sunday school, whatever you want to call it. Attend that regularly. Of course, you're going to miss every once in a while, but make it your goal, make it your focus to be with other believers who can encourage you and challenge you to not approve of sin and to focus on the Lord and not the world, not yourself. Okay? Listen, that's what I've got for today. That's how I want to encourage you to avoid falling into the traps of what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, so hey, thanks for joining me today. And I do hope that this was a blessing and an encouragement to you. Listen, the most encouraging thing about Genesis chapter 19 is that verse, and I think it was verse 29, that says, God remembered Abraham. Because here's the truth. If God remembered Abraham and is actively fulfilling his promises to Abraham, God remembers you. Whatever it is that you've got going on, God didn't forget about you. God remembers you. So listen, if this was an encouragement, if this challenged you to live a life pleasing to the Lord, if it was a blessing, then click that like button, smash that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and share this out to whoever you want. And hopefully they will be blessed by these same scriptures that we were blessed by today. So that's all I have for today. So until next time, be blessed. And remember, share the gospel with somebody else today. Don't wait till later. Do it today. I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.